Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Mets Daily on the Fan Arch Network. John Saponaro here with you today and every day to talk about our New York Mets. But before we get started, a couple of things right out of the gate. First and foremost, shout out to our friends over at Kalshi for sponsoring the video for a limited time. Use the code FANARCHBASEBALL on the Kalshi app to get $10 when you trade 10. Of course, if you're not a subscriber of the channel already, we would love for you to be a part of our community as we sit just over 4,000 subscribers, trying to get to 5,000 by the end of the baseball season. We'd love to do it, and we would love for you to be a part of it. And last but certainly not least, just want to apologize for the last 2 days, coming in a little bit later with episodes of Mets Daily. Life gets in the way. Had some things scheduled, some meetings, some people in town, just a whole bunch of stuff that prevented me from recording exactly when I wanted to, which pushed the release back, not only of yesterday's show, but today's show as well. Should be back to our regularly scheduled programming coming on Monday. But thanks for bearing with me. And now that that is out of the way, let's get into the conversation about our New York Mets. First and foremost, we have the Mets opening up the second half against the Philadelphia Phillies with a nice, little tidy, well-played game and a 4-1 win for the Mets. We're going to dive into some of the top performers, most notably Christian Scott and Francisco Alvarez, coming up in the second and third segments. But just to look at this game from an overview perspective, like I said, a well-played game overall, good performances. It was the kind of baseball game that you just like to watch if you're a fan of baseball. Not particularly high scoring, not particularly low scoring. Your team wins. So, you're sitting there and you're like, okay, I feel pretty good. Obviously, with where the Mets season is at, you take all of that and you say, okay, well, what does it really mean, right? All of that stuff is the backdrop, is the undertone, and that's fair. But just as a self-contained baseball game, it's a baseball game that I enjoyed watching from start to finish. I guess I listened to a little bit of it in the car because I had to pop out for a minute, but it's a game that I enjoyed taking in, and I haven't said that enough in 2026 with the New York Mets. So for that and that alone, if nothing else, I am grateful. There's a couple of other things that were particular standouts. First and foremost, the wildfires going on north of the border in Canada have wreaked havoc on the air quality and obviously the air quality in Canada, but also the landscape in Canada. And, just unbelievable. Like, my heart goes out to all of the folks dealing with that. Living here in Southern California, I've become very aware of the destruction and how awful wildfires can be. And to see that happen in Canada and to see it happening more frequently in places around the world where it wasn't necessarily prevalent in the past is obviously a huge bummer. And to see folks on the East Coast in New York and in Philadelphia and the surrounding areas dealing with the fallout of wildfires, again, something that as a kid growing up in New York, living in New York for 35 years, I never even thought about wildfires for 1 second. And, here we are now, kind of seeing it happen much more frequently. And that's, again, just an unbelievably sad state of affairs. So my heart goes out to all the people dealing with this. Stay safe. Air quality issues are a serious deal. They don't maybe sound like it's that big of a deal, especially if you're not used to it. But if you're sensitive, if you have asthma, if you have allergies, especially, you want to mask up. You want to make sure that you're, being safe if you go to these games or if you're going to be outside on what should be a nice weekend in the New York area, the Philly area, whatever. And that brings me to the game itself, which got moved up an hour because of the air quality. Air quality was supposed to get worse once the sun went down. So the Mets and the Phillies and Major League Baseball decided to make an executive decision and try to move this game up a little bit. It seemed like a bit of a half measure. The way the sky was getting darker, the way the smoke was filling the air as the game went along, it seemed like maybe a game that shouldn't have been played. I do understand that the Mets and the Phillies were the first game back after the break, and they were the only game in town, quite literally. The only two teams playing. The air quality is not supposed to get much better over the course of the weekend, so even with the off day today, the weird off day on Friday, they didn't really want to push it back, and so I do understand they were in a bit of between a rock and a hard place on this one, but it just felt like a half measure and a weird choice. Hopefully, everybody comes out of this still feeling good. That's the players, the umpires, the coaches, the fans, everybody involved. Thankfully, it didn't affect anybody too much. And I guess they did do the right thing by checking in constantly with the home plate umpire and, relaying that message not only to, people who monitor this on a scientific level, on a professional level, but also checking in with just how the players felt. Can you breathe? Are you okay? And so from that standpoint, I guess it was, handled about as well as you could. I mean, the people there, if the league schedules the game and the league says you have to play, the umpires are going to be there, players are going to be there, they're going to do what they do. And so just a very weird situation. And again, a situation that people on the East Coast, not particularly intimately aware of, but something that's unfortunately becoming a little bit more frequent and prevalent. And so, just everybody who was there, again, hope you're feeling good, hope you're feeling safe. Just a very odd situation. Back on the field, though, for Major League Baseball, for the game played, couple of things really stood out. First and foremost, Bo Bichette back in the lineup after missing 3 games, the final 3 games of the season. I guess he came in and pinch hit, I believe, twice against Boston, but it was smart after fouling the ball off of his leg very hard, I think twice in one at bat, basically to the same spot. Andy Green just said, look, this guy's kind of beat up on his legs. He's okay, but we're going to use the All-Star break and rest him a couple games here to end the first half to really let him heal up, get him back on his feet. So it was nice to see Bo Bichette back on his feet in the first game and playing for the New York Mets. Now, on the flip side of that, it was scary to see Juan Soto leave this game with calf tightness. Now, after the game, Andy Green similarly said, hey, he just felt a little something. We don't think it's a big deal. We just thought it was smart to get him off of his feet so it didn't turn into anything. It's not the same calf that he injured earlier in the season. So look, when you have a player like Soto, lost season or not, you have an investment in a player like Soto for as long as the Mets do. You never want to see something like this happen, but I think the Mets were exercising extreme caution. Discretion is the better part of valor. This season is over. Soto wants to be out there. He's a guy who likes to play every day, but if he's feeling something, there's no reason to force him out there. They said he's going to be back. They don't expect him to miss any time. He should be able to play over the weekend. Maybe the Mets give him a couple games at DH on Saturday and Sunday. We'll see, but it was smart for them to get him off of his feet. And I understood why they did that. And then Luke Weaver, who has been absolutely spectacular for 25 game appearances in a row, I believe, or 26 game appearances in a row, over a month of calendar eaten away by this scoreless streak, this no earned run streak. That streak is snapped on Thursday night. Trey Turner gets him in the 8th inning for a solo home run. But what a streak it was. Went 26 innings pitched, second most, I believe, in Mets franchise history for a reliever behind Mark Guthrie. So an unbelievable performance for, again, over a month. 26 games, but over a month off the calendar for Luke Weaver. And Luke Weaver is, I know it's not a foregone conclusion because of the contract for 2027, but I think Luke Weaver is going to be too valuable. As I've said before on this show, the Mets, somebody is going to make an offer for Luke Weaver that the Mets cannot refuse. And he was going to probably be a hot commodity anyway because relief pitchers always get dealt at the deadline. But the fact that other teams like Boston have gotten back into the race, and so Aroldis Chapman is off the board, there's not really going to be any closers. So not only are you talking about late inning relief pitchers, but Luke Weaver, who has a ton of experience as a closer, he might be the best relief pitcher / closing pitcher on the market. And what he did for the Mets, despite the fact that this season has been abysmal, has only increased his value. His value probably would have been pretty high to begin with, but you go 26 scoreless innings as a relief pitcher, and especially when relievers can be fickle, and one year they're great and one year they're bad. Right now, he is on a great stretch, and I think he's only helped his value, which, of course, will only help the New York Mets. So we can't talk about this game, really, without talking about the two standout performers, like I mentioned before. First of which is the guy who sets the tone, the starting pitcher, Christian Scott. Christian Scott gets the assignment coming out of the break to start for the New York Mets, and he is very, very, very impressive yet again. His manager, Andy Green, and you could see the player development side of Andy Green showing after Christian Scott's last start before the All-Star break. He was good. And Andy Green basically said, hey, I think you could be better. Not throwing the kid under the bus, but just like, I think your stuff's even better than this. I think you play even better. Like, your stuff plays up even better than this. And we think you can go deeper into games. We think you can get more swings and misses. He basically threw the gauntlet down in front of Christian Scott. Christian Scott took that and ran with it, and that's exactly what he did in this start in what was a difficult place to pitch in, especially if it's not your home ballpark where you're not super used to it, especially if you're a young pitcher where you're not super used to it yet, and against this lineup that features a lot of really good hitters, but especially the big two in Harper and Schwarber, two lefties. And Christian Scott not only handled them, but acquitted himself so well. His numbers on the game: 5 2/3 innings pitched, only 3 hits, no runs allowed, no walks allowed. And here are the big two stats for me: 7 strikeouts, 79 pitches, 56 of them for strikes. That is an unbelievably good outing. And when you look at the 5 2/3, I'm going to toss that aside for a second because, again, remember, this is a guy who is coming off of a minor injury. It's only, I think, his 3rd or his 4th start back from coming back from his little issue that kept him on the IL for, I think, 2 starts, 2 weeks. And then he's also a guy coming off of a massive elbow surgery, hasn't pitched a ton of innings in the last couple of years, hasn't pitched basically at all. And so in a lost season, Mets are being careful with him. Mets are handling with kid gloves, appropriately so. So I don't worry about the 5 2/3 innings pitched. I don't worry about the 79 pitches. The Mets are obviously capping him. And we saw this a little bit, even though the situation is different, with how the Mets handled Clay Holmes last year. The Mets' philosophy as an organization is not hard inning caps or hard pitch caps where they're like, look, this guy is converting from a reliever or this guy is coming back off an injury. After X innings, we're shutting him down. The Mets take each player on a case-by-case basis based on how they're performing, how they say they feel, what they think the target innings might be, and what is left in the season, what is worthwhile left in the season. For instance, last year, the Mets season came down to the final game. This year, that's not going to be the case, of course. So I'm sure at some point they will shut Christian Scott down, but maybe not. Maybe they just decide, hey, he feels good. What we need him to do is actually get innings and build his innings up after not pitching last year. And maybe they go to a 6-man rotation. Maybe they go to a spot, in late August, early September, where they have an opener for Christian Scott, or they're just very restrictive with what he's doing, where they want him to start games, but they're like, look, you're starting games. None of these games matter. You're giving us 50 pitches. We want you to get starts. We want you to work every 5th day, but we don't care right now if you only throw 50 pitches because that's not going to matter long term. Long term, next spring training, you come in, you build up to your 100 pitch threshold or whatever it is. So I like the way the Mets are handling this, but more importantly, Christian Scott has been absolutely electric. He is showing why he is the number 1 prospect or the number 1 pitching prospect in the Mets organization a couple of years ago. I've said that before on this show, but he is showing it time and time again, and it is great to see. And you look up, and all of a sudden, Christian Scott, who had to wait like 12 starts, dating back to his debut, or 13 starts, whatever it was, to get his first major league win, he's got a 3-1 record and a 2.87 ERA on the season. And that is really, really good stuff from a really impressive pitcher. And it is no wonder, and it is no surprise, that the Mets have essentially said, don't even call us about Christian Scott. We're going to talk about that in the final segment. But basically, there was some reporting out today where the Mets said, we're open for business. We'll sell, we'll listen, but we're not even taking phone calls on, of course, Juan Soto, AJ Ewing, Carson Benj, Nolan McLean, and the aforementioned Christian Scott. Baseball season is here, and now you can trade every game on Kalshi, and you guys know what I do. I sit down to record this show. It doesn't matter if I'm coming in a little late. I still do the same thing. I sit down to record the show, but before I hit record, I pop on over to the Kalshi app, and I see where you can find value or something interesting related to our New York Mets. And I'll be honest, no game today. Looking ahead to the game on Saturday, there was some stuff I didn't love from a value standpoint as to where things were trading. And the great thing about Kalshi is you can trade into and out of positions. You can be advantageous based on what the market is showing you at the time. And so I'll give you my pick as I normally do. But remember, This game is not today. This game is tomorrow afternoon. So maybe tomorrow morning on a Saturday, you wake up, you get your cup of coffee, you get your bagel, you get your bacon, egg, and cheese, whatever it is. You go to the gym, you go for your run. I don't care what you do. You're getting up for work because you're working on a Saturday. It's all good. But maybe you pop over to the Kalshi app and you say, hey, I like what John said yesterday, but let me see if any of these markets have moved. Let me see if any of this has shifted. So remember, that's what happens when it's peer-to-peer and you can trade into and out of positions. But the one I'm going to give you here today is a simple one. I think the best value is the Mets to win this game, trading at 40 cents a share. Now, right now, the scheduled starters for Saturday are Sean Manaea and Jesus Luzardo. Jesus Luzardo is a lefty. He's having a good season. He's got good stuff. The lefties give Mets fits all season long. So I don't know if the Mets are going to win this game, but I know that if you believe in the Mets' ability to take a victory here, 40 cents a share is pretty good value. That means that $100 will get you $239 if you are correct. On Kalshi, like we mentioned before, you're trading against peers in a live market, which means there is no house. And as that probability changes, you can get into and out of your position for a limited time. Download the Kalshi app and use the code FANARCHBASEBALL to get $10 when you trade 10. Kalshi, trade on anything. Must be 18 and over. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risks and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. Now we have to talk about the other standout performer of this game last night, and that was one Francisco Alvarez. And you know, if you listen to this show, if you follow me on Twitter, if you listen or you watch Till Mets Do Us Part, my other show that I do once a week with my co-host Matt Ibby Ibanez, then you know that I love Francisco Alvarez. You know that people have soured on him, and I have not. I can admit that he has been disappointing when you talk about living up to the hype of being the number one catching prospect and one of the top prospects in baseball and the Mets' number one organizational prospect. Yes, there has been some letdown. Yes, there has been some injury where he's not been able to be out there and really perform and really hone his craft and really cut down on the overswings and stuff like that. Absolutely. The defense has regressed 100%. He is not the perfect player. Not by any stretch. But remember, he still has 3 years of team-friendly control. He is still just 24 years old because he came up when he was basically 21, so young. He is a catcher, and whether he's a good defensive catcher or a bad defensive catcher is sort of irrelevant because the catching position is down across the league, and what he is capable of doing, at least from an offensive standpoint, is something that is too much to give up on at this stage. If he was 28 years old and still doing this and 1 year away from free agency, I could understand why people would want to move on from Francisco Alvarez. But again, at 24 years old with 3 years of team-friendly control, that is a bridge too far for me. And when you watch a game like the one last night, you understand why. He absolutely willed the Mets to win with his bat. And again, from a catcher, with the kind of power that he has, that is just something that you're not really seeing across the league, not in a big way. And he hits the 2 home runs, and it's basically the difference in the game. Look, Brett Beatty did his thing. He adds a home run. Mets go up 3-0. Trey Turner hits his home run. It's 3-1. I get that. And then, of course, you add the insurance run that's a combined good at bat from Jared Young, who gets on, and then the double down the line from A.J. Ewing, and that's where you get the scoring, right? That totals the 4 runs for the Mets, the 5 runs in the game. But Francisco Alvarez, for all intents and purposes, put this game on his back. And, you know, some of you might say, no, he didn't do that. It's, you know, it's just two runs. Yeah, it's home runs, but it's just 2 solo shots, blah, 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 blah. But like each time Francisco Alvarez hit those home runs, they were of significance because he broke the scoreless tie and then he added to the Mets to give them a little bit of breathing room. You know, Mets go up 1-0 on the strength of Francisco Alvarez. Mets go up 2-0 on the strength of Francisco Alvarez. Beatty adds, or I suppose 2-0, it was Beatty and then Alvarez. So Beatty gave them the extra bit of insurance at first, and then Alvarez added that 3rd run. But still, this is a guy who breaks the scoreless tie, and this is a guy who puts the Mets in a nice and he's certainly better positioned to win by going up 3-0 over a team with the firepower that the Phillies have, playing in a bandbox like Philadelphia. So shout out to Ewing and Young and Brett Beatty too, but Francisco Alvarez is just a guy, and he's showing you why. He's a guy the Mets need to hold on to. He's a guy the Mets need to build around. He's not the perfect player. He may not be the number one overall prospect player. He may not live up to that hype right now, and he may never. But he is not a guy that you should be quick to cast out of here, because the options to replace him would not be great. And it is bad baseball policy in any era, to give up on a catcher that can be a plus offensive bat, and especially when that catcher is only 24 years old. And so you look up on the season, Francisco Alvarez has a 259 average with a 773 OPS, 11 home runs, and 24 RBI. I will take that. I will take that every day of the week and twice on Sunday, like they say. Last but certainly not least, we have to kind of continue this saga of something that I said on this show numerous times I did not want to talk about, and that is the possibility of trading Francisco Lindor. But because it remains a topic of conversation in the Mets sphere, because beat reporters and people who work for SNY and people who work on this network or that network or whatever are talking about it, new stuff is coming out all the time, so I have to address it. It is my duty. As the host of Mets Daily, it is my duty, it is my responsibility to all of you. But I will say this. Let's consider the source. Let's consider the reporting. So now, because I recorded a little late here today, we actually have the benefit of a second report that we'll get to kind of close things out. But the initial report that came out is from Chelsea Jane at SNY, and she basically said what I mentioned earlier. Mets are open for business. They're not going to wait till the deadline to sell, like in the 25th hour, the 11th hour. They are going to evaluate, make deals along the way. They are going to look for the best offer. If that best offer comes, they're really not going to wait on it and say, oh, if we pressure a team up till, 3:59 on August 3rd, maybe we can get more. No, if they get the value that they want, they're going to jump at trades, especially for the rental guys, especially for Minter and Raley and Peralta and all of those people. She said that Soto, Ewing, Benj, Scott, and McLean are the only untouchable, we're not even taking calls on player. And of course, conspicuous by his absence is Francisco Lindor. Now, to her credit, Chelsea reported that this information came from, quote, a rival executive. And this is where you have to consider the source. This is where I always tell you to take all of this information with a grain of salt and have the media literacy to realize what you are being told and where it is coming from. I don't know much about Chelsea Jane's work prior to her getting this job at SNY, but since she's been at SNY, it's been fine. The coverage has been good. Do I agree with everything she says? I do not, but as a reporter, it seems like the reporting has been legit. So I'm not calling into question her when I say consider the source. I'm calling into question her source for you to digest. So when she says a rival executive, that is likely, very likely, probable, whatever, a front office personnel for another team. And when you think about it that way, you say rival executive, you go, oh, an executive. Oh, somebody in the know. It's easy to latch onto that word. But rival is the one that you have to latch onto. Now, rival doesn't necessarily mean in the literal sense. It doesn't have to be a Braves or a Phillies executive, although it could be, or a Yankees executive, although it could be. It's just an executive that works on another team. And if they work for another team, that means they have their own agenda. And whether that agenda is, you know what, I work for the Phillies and I don't like the Mets and we have to compete with the Mets, maybe not this year, but in the future, and I want to stir the pot and I want to drive a wedge between the Mets and Francisco Lindor, and I want to make it so that maybe the Mets will trade Lindor, not now, but maybe in the offseason. I want to make this, I want to do what I can to make their relationship even more strained. I'm going to say this. Now, it's not to say that what the executive is saying isn't true. It's not to say that the Mets didn't say, hey, look, 5 people we're not even taking calls on, which means that the Mets will listen, and that's fine. You can take a call, you can listen, But the agenda, the reason why the rival executive is saying what they're saying, and the reason why they've chose to release that to Chelsea Jane, that's the reason. That's the thing you have to key in on, is that there is agenda there. Whether that agenda is purely nefarious, like I said, to just drive a wedge, try to drive a wedge between Lindor and the team in the court of public opinion, or whether that is, hey, we're Team X and we would like to get Lindor, and this is our little way of throwing it out there, that letting you know that maybe we can. But there just is an agenda, and that agenda is not to serve the New York Mets, and that agenda is not to serve the New York Mets fans. So when you hear that and you take it and you run with it, just be careful. That's all I'm going to say. Then, a couple hours later, this story was, I don't want to say refuted, but clarified by Will Salmon and Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic. And if you watch this show, you know how I feel. Just yesterday, we talked about, who you can trust and who you can't trust and which sources are good and which sources are bad as far as Mets media coverage is concerned. Will Salmon is the best. Will Salmon is the tops. And Will Salmon basically said, Will Salmon, along with Ken Rosenthal, are reporting that it is highly unlikely that the Mets trade Francisco Lindor. One, because he has a no-trade clause as a 10-5 guy. Two, he has a very high contract which a lot of teams can't afford. Three, he is having a down year, so his value is not really commensurate with the type of player that he's to begin with, especially when you consider the injuries. And four, the Mets being able to get fair value back for a player that they still value very highly, whether you as a fan do or not. The bottom line is the Mets realize that Francisco Lindor is a big part of their team, and he's a very good player, and he's not far removed from having back-to-back MVP caliber seasons. And so when you look at all of that, the Mets can't really get fair value back for Francisco Lindor. They're not going to eat money to trade a guy that they still think is good. Now, the Mets might eat money in other deals. The Mets might say, hey, we got to get Luis Robert off this team, and the only way to really get Robert off of this team is to just say, we acquired him knowing he was going to cost us $20 million in 2026. Let's just pay the rest of the deal and send him to a team for free and get anything back. They might do that. But the Mets don't want to eat money on a player that they still value and have him go play somewhere else and maybe win a World Series, because a team acquiring Lindor for the money, for the player assets, means that they've got to be really close. They've got to really believe it. And so you're going to trade away a player that you still believe in, that you still value at a high level. You're going to pay some of his salary, let's say just 25%, and then you're going to watch that player go on a deep run like he did with you a couple of years ago, where he willed your team to the playoffs and dragged your team to within 2 games of the World Series. You're going to go and watch him maybe win a World Series somewhere else when you still think he's a good player. It's bad business. It's bad business. It's bad for the sport. It's bad for future free agents. It's bad for your perception around the league. You think fans are down on the Mets now? Let the Mets trade Francisco Lindor and let Francisco Lindor go win a World Series with, I don't know, the Dodgers. I don't know, the Yankees. So be careful what you wish for if you want Lindor gone so bad. It's foolhardy. And all of the reasons why Salmon and Rosenthal outline how this is unlikely and why this is unlikely are spot on. And I'm going to end you guys with this. I'm going to present a challenge to you as we close out the episode and we close out the week, and I'll be back on Monday in our regularly scheduled time. Here's my challenge to you. If you are in the let's trade Francisco Lindor camp, I want to know your plan. And what I mean by your plan is your very specific plan on how that works and what that looks like. I need to know a team, at least one team, that they can trade him to. Which prospects they should target. Will Lindor waive his full no-trade clause to go to that team or that city? And how you could get him to do that, what you could convince him to do. Then I want to know, are the Mets taking on money in return? So is there a contract swap? And if there isn't a contract swap, how much money of the deal are the Mets eating? I need a specific plan. And in that plan, not only for the first part of the deal, I want to know the second part of the deal. Who plays shortstop for the New York Mets? Not only for the rest of 2026, because it's a lost year. Say, call up Ronnie Mauricio, stick him there, whatever. Fine. Who plays shortstop for the New York Mets in 2027? Who plays shortstop for the New York Mets in 2028? Who plays shortstop for the Mets in 2029? Because here's what you need to realize. The Mets have no depth at shortstop in the upper levels of the minor leagues. That means that no one is knocking on the door. They have two people who maybe can be shortstops. One is Mitch Voigt, who is in Brooklyn right now in A-ball. He's playing some shortstop. He's playing some second base. He's playing kind of all around the diamond. He's a super athlete. Maybe he could be a shortstop, but he is not close. And then their best shortstop prospect is Elian Pena, and he is a child, a literal teenager in low A ball. He is even further away. And the other similarity that both of these guys have, Pena and Voigt, you don't even know if they're really shortstops. Mitch Voigt might be a second baseman, and Elian Pena, because he's so young, he might develop, he might fill out, he might be too big to play shortstop, he might have to go play third base. And they're not close anyway. Then when you look around the landscape of Major League Baseball, 5-win shortstops, 30-30 shortstops who are good on both sides of the ball don't grow on trees. It's very top-heavy in Major League Baseball right now at the shortstop position. There's a handful of guys up here, and then there's everybody else. And the everybody else, they have their warts. They're either bad defenders or they're bad players with the bat. And I know Lindor has had a very mediocre year, offensively and defensively. Part of that is due to the injuries. Part of that is due to no spring training. Part of that is due to coming back very quickly after the calf strain. It's just a lost year for him. And maybe some of that stuff, the mental lapses, maybe there's something else going on, that's fine. Maybe he has lost the step. Maybe he is on the decline. I'll even give you those last two. But 75% of what Francisco Lindor has been as a Met is still going to be better than most of the other players around Major League Baseball at shortstop. Because the big guys, the really impressive guys, they've already been signed. Some of these guys have gotten pre-arb extensions out in with the Athletics and with the Pirates and with the Tigers. Like, they've got blue chip, both sides of the ball shortstops. They're not going anywhere. You have other guys you could get, but like I said, they either can't hit or they can't field. Or you got guys that you can get, but they're on worse deals and they're older than Lindor. You want Xander Bogaerts? He's older than Lindor. His deal is longer. His deal is worse. And he's not as good on both sides of the ball, declining. You want Corey Seager? He's always hurt. You're mad that Lindor is hurt, but he's always hurt. He's also older than Lindor, and his deal is more expensive. Those are guys you could get, I'm sure. Why would you want to do that? Why is that the direction you'd want to go in? So if you start to look around, it becomes, okay, who's your shortstop in 2027? But then who's your shortstop in 2028? Who's your shortstop in 2029? You're starting to see there's not a lot of places to go. And even if you say, well, John, Lindor's on the decline, okay. Well, maybe in a year or two, Lindor can play second base. And then you can figure out shortstop. And then with Lindor and Soto and the continued growth and emergence of Ewing and Benj and whatever else the Mets do, if they keep Bo Bichette, whatever, maybe they can afford to carry a guy at shortstop who's defense first. But if they trade Lindor, there is no fix. There is no heir apparent in the immediate future and in the middle future. There were maybe two guys on the horizon that aren't in the Mets organization that you could say maybe are available to the Mets. One is Gunnar Henderson, who's a free agent in 2029, shortstop for the Baltimore Orioles, former top prospect, guy who's been a little up and down offensively. But he's a guy who's still young. I think he's 25 years old. So, he's a guy in a couple years you can maybe get your hands on, depending on what Baltimore does, whatever. But again, you never know. These guys could just decide they want to sign their franchise player, one of their franchise players, and go with it that way. And then the other one is Elly De La Cruz, who's going to be a free agent in 2030. Now, if I'm the Cincinnati Reds, I'm doing whatever I can to keep Elly De La Cruz forever. Maybe they don't. Maybe they do. I don't know. Small market. Who cares? CBA. We don't know what's going on. But that's the point. You can't just bank on this. 2030 is a long time. 2029 is a long time. So if we get to 2029 and Gunnar Henderson is a free agent and the Mets decide that that's who they want to be their shortstop and Francisco Lindor is still here for another couple of years, then you can move Lindor to second. You can have Gunnar Henderson be your shortstop and that's taken care of. But if you trade Lindor now, that's not even an option. Gunnar Henderson's not walking through the door tomorrow. You can't get him tomorrow. Or what? Do you want to trade prospects to get him? I mean, he's not available anyway. But the point is, everybody was so down a couple weeks ago about the Mets farm system taking a massive hit, even though it's understandable why. And now they're like, oh, I don't know how this could happen. I don't know. We have to worry about building back our farm. At least at the deadline, we can reestablish our farm. So they're going to do all of that. And then they're going to turn around and trade Lindor and then trade assets to get his replacement. It doesn't make any sense. If you just apply regular logic to it, it doesn't make any sense. So that's my challenge to you. Go look at my Twitter. I reposted something where all of the shortstops, the other 29 teams around Major League Baseball and who might be available and how and who isn't available and why. It was from Carson at Mets Weekly. Shout out to him. But go take a look at that list. And if you still want to tell me why Francisco Lindor should be traded, needs to be traded, why you think it's a good idea, whatever, remember the criteria. You can answer in the comments on this video, or you can go and you can @ me on Twitter. But you have to be able to tell me the team. You have to be able to tell me the prospects that you want. You have to be able to tell me why Lindor would waive his no-trade clause despite the fact that all the reporting says he likes New York, he likes Queens, he wants to stay here, he wants to win. You have to tell me that. You have to tell me if the Mets are taking on a bad contract or, just money in return. How much of that money? Who is that player that they're taking back? And then you have to tell me if they're not going to do that, how much money are they going to eat? And then who's the shortstop for at least 2027? That's the criteria. Because that's what you have to contend with. And there have been people in my replies who have said, trade him for anything you can get. That's not how this works. It's not how it works. One, quite frankly, it's dumb. But if you want to trade him, give me a package. Give me a full plan, specific plan, and then I'll listen to it. That's going to do it for this episode of Mets Daily. Like I said before, if you haven't already, subscribed to the channel. Hoping to get to 5,000 subscribers. We'd love to do it before the season ends, and we would love for you to be a part of the community. Until next time, I'm John Saponaro. See you on Monday.